Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sideline Shenanigans podcast. Today with Jacob Maggardin,
Dalton Phillips.
and we're gonna be looking at a pretty good recap of games here. I mean, of course, we had a great week. I mean, guest picker was on; he did well in his picks. We didn't do bad in ours. Both of us were 500 or better, so a step up from last week after the three correct picks last week. Again, let's just dive right into these games. I mean, as you can see, I have a massive one that's going to be, this is going to have implications on playoff spots, on the current AP poll. Kentucky travels to Ole Miss, and it's a shocker. Kentucky, their defense is awesome. I mean, their defense is legit. They held Georgia to 13 points. They held Ole Miss, I mean, they have one of the best, most prolific offenses in college football. They hold them to 17. And I mean, it's just so impressive what they've done in those two games alone. And even though they haven't looked good at times this year, they've looked phenomenal in two of their most important games. Looking at the stats here, as you can tell, I mean, Kentucky quarterback Brock Vandagriff, he's obviously the Georgia transfer. He struggled mightily in a game earlier this year. There was a game, I'm not 100% sure who they played, but he was 3 for 10 with 30 passing yards. He comes out against Ole Miss and goes 18 for 28, 243 yards and a touchdown. That is extremely respectable. I mean, that is he almost outplays Dart, who's talked about as one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And as you can see, I mean, he spread the ball around, man. They have Barryon Brown, who's a phenomenal receiver. I mean, he's a guy that's going to go to the draft for sure. And Dane Key plays amazing. 8 catches, 105, and a touchdown. Of course, looking at the other side for Ole Miss, again, this is a heartbreaker for them. They had to win their games against the opponents in the conference that weren't those top tier ranked teams, and they drop one early. That it doesn't eliminate them, of course. They're still going to be a top 10 team, and they're still going to have a chance to compete in the SEC for a championship or whatnot. But this is a huge loss because you lose a game in the SEC against an opponent that wasn't expected to beat you at all. Again, looking at Ole Miss's stats, Dart actually doesn't play bad. I mean, he goes 18 for 27, 261, a touchdown. And again, like I said, Kentucky's defense has looked really good.
Yeah,
So that's not a
this Kentucky team is kind of scary. Like it kind of scares me a little bit because Tennessee comes on next. They play them a couple weeks from now, and their defense is that's just a scary team. And they play with that Georgia team. That Georgia team's a good football team.
yeah.
You've seen that last past weekend against Alabama. I mean, Alabama played excellent, but look at the second half of that Georgia team. That
Mhm.
Georgia team was excellent,
Oh
and
yeah.
Kentucky's it just beat a top 10 opponent. That's one of their losses. Even though the one that was South Carolina, that's just a like the beginning of the season jitters and stuff, I think. But this Kentucky team is kind of scary.
Yeah, that game was the game where Vandagriff
Yeah.
went 3 for 10. South Carolina's a good football team, and when they're healthy, they've looked a lot better too. And now they've looked kind of rough without health with their quarterback, especially. But no, they're also a good football team. So yeah, that Kentucky game, again, like you said, it was one of those first games in the conference. Actually, I think
It
it
was
was
kind
their
of
first game in
push them over
conference
a little
play.
bit.
And nobody plays great in that first game in the conference play. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Kentucky, this is an impressive win. I mean, this gives them a chance to at least throw their hat in there and say maybe we end up getting ranked soon. I mean, if they can compete with teams, and they're 1-2 in the conference now because, like we mentioned, they've already got a loss to Georgia in the conference. They've already got a loss to South Carolina in the conference. If you can just get big wins in this conference, you're going to get looks. Yes. So again, Kentucky plays phenomenal. Now, I don't expect this same Kentucky team all year. There's games where they've played up to competition and played down, but that's just a phenomenal game, man. I mean, and that's obviously a huge upset. Next game here, Minnesota. They have to play a Michigan team that is, coming in with a little bit of heat. They've rolled in here with a little bit of steam. I mean, they obviously have a big win, and Minnesota hasn't looked very good this year. Truthfully, they've looked pretty bad. They come in here. A lot of people don't think this is going to be that close. Now, we do know that it's going to be lower scoring because Michigan keeps the ball on the ground a ton, and Minnesota is not a super high-powered passing offense at all. It's not super low scoring. That's not like a 17-10 football game. But 27-24, Michigan does win. But, man, look at that fourth quarter from Minnesota. A 21-point fourth.
That's scary, especially when they're in the big house. Like
Yeah.
in the big houses, that's one of the harder places to play out in the country, if not the. And to be able to play a good game with the all right Michigan team.
Yeah, Michigan, their passing ability is so, so bad that it is hard to say they're a top, 10, 15 football team.
Yeah, they don't really have a quarterback. Like Alex Orji is not a great passing quarterback
No,
at all.
he's not a passer. He's
No,
a pure runner. I mean, he completed some passes in this game, and it's truthfully the best he's passed the ball all year. But, I mean, he still has a pick.
he even has an interception. That's his best passing game yet.
And
So
he still goes for only 86 yards. I mean, it's not enough for them to go out. They're not going to beat a team like Ohio State playing anywhere near like this. They'll get blown out. Talking about Minnesota, Max Brosmer, I mean, 27 for 40, 258, a touchdown and a pick. It's not an awful game, and that's solid. And he did lead a comeback here at the end of the game and got him back in it. I mean, look at this. Minnesota's run game is awful. They don't run the ball well. And even though Taylor has 2 rushing touchdowns, he's only averaging 2.8 yards per carry. Stark contrast when you look at the other side, because Michigan is all run. Khalil Mullings is amazing, phenomenal football player, 24 for 111, 2 touchdowns. He has had this team on his back, and he continues to do so. Donovan Edwards goes 9 for 34. Again, you just don't see the kind of production we.
He's supposed to be like a stud, but like
Well,
he's even
yeah,
on the cover of NCAA 25. I mean,
yeah.
you think if you're there, you're going to be one of the elite athletes that you want to watch out for. But he's just
Yeah.
not doing it this year.
No, we've not seen production from him at all. You look at the passing stats. Minnesota passes the ball around a lot of different receiver catch passes. On the other side for Michigan, if you're Orts, you gotta know, man. Use Colston Loveland. I mean, it's still not enough. 4 for 41. We got to get that ball to him. He should have the ball. I don't know how many times a game.
10 times a game, probably.
10
8, 10
times
times a
even.
game.
Give him the ball. He is arguably the best tight end in the entire country. He is a outlet. He is an easy little check down pass that makes it so much easier for a guy like Orji to throw the ball. And he's just not using him as much as I think they should. Again, looking at defense, of course, we've talked about it many a times, but Michigan's defense is really good, and that's what obviously keeps them in football games. I mean, 5 sacks, 9 TFLs. 2 of those come from Mason Graham. I mean, that's an awesome game. And Will Johnson, we've talked about many times. He will lock up your best player. Next game here, of course, me as a Tech fan, so sad.
I'm representing here though.
It is. It is honestly, it's disgusting how the ACC handled the end of that game. And you're gonna hear it from me. I'm a Tech fan, whatnot. But you can listen to anybody in the country talk about it.
Yeah,
I mean, they talked about it on College Game Day Saturday morning. It yes or no on the catch. There is so many different opinions on that. But that is not what the top talking point is. It's what is the replay review now? What is it? I mean, it's clear evidence that it's not a catch is what it's supposed to be.
Yep.
Where was your evidence?
There was no clear evidence, and they called it a catch on the field, which is the crazy
Exactly.
part. That's insane to me.
That's what
I actually was not able to watch the game due to power outages and all this hurricane nonsense. They played a good ball game though. I'm that's a great game for Tech. I said it though at the beginning. I said that they'd play a good game here because they play up to their opponents.
Well,
always.
yeah. No, Tech. This same football team right here, if they go to Vanderbilt especially and play like this, I mean Vanderbilt they would have blown out of the water playing like this. And now again, I've talked about how Rutgers is a good football team. They're now they're finally getting media attention and national attention. But again, if you play like this against Rutgers, you win that one. So yes, it sucks to lose it. And in my opinion, like I just said, I don't know how that wasn't ruled. I mean, it's unbelievable that it was overturned, truthfully. And again, we've had a lot of media, and it's not just me as a Tech fan saying it. It is media and plenty of other analysts that have talked about it and how you look at that rule and you read it and you say, how in the world was that clear evidence to overturn it? Again, to dive into the stats, again, like I said, Tech played phenomenal. This is the best game they've played this year. Drones goes 189, 2 touchdowns and a pick. And then on the other side, of course, his cousin, Cam Ward. And, this guy's a Heisman candidate, so he's obviously going to play well. But Tech was actually getting in his head a little bit. We got to him. We made him throw 2 picks. He got very uncomfortable in situations. And, of course, he still led the comeback at the end of the game. But Tech did a good job, I think, at least forcing him to make the plays and make him be that Heisman-level guy. And yes, he made plays, but Tech kept him contained. You look at the running game for both teams. I mean, Bashal
Newton is one of the best running backs in college football.
Oh, yeah, easily. I mean, this is now his 4th straight game with over 100 yards. Again, he only does it on 19 carries, which is phenomenal. That's a 7-yard per carry average. A touchdown. Drones runs well in this one. And Drones made tons of plays in this game, though, just as a quarterback, just as watching the game that won't show up on the stat sheet. We ran an end around, which is the Jalen Lane rushing touchdown. Drones gets out in front of Jalen Lane and blocks like a lead blocker, like a fullback, and runs a guy through the end zone, blocking him. That is a quarterback doing that. That's the effort you want to see from your quarterback. You need that. And then for Miami, I mean, they got the run game going a little bit. Damian Martinez, he was back and running the ball well this week. But Jordan Lyle was their leading rusher last week. He only goes for 2 yards. They obviously were not using him in this game as much. And then Cam Ward does get out of the pocket a couple times here and there, and he did make a lot of scrambles with his feet on 3rd downs. Looking at the receiving, of course, Arroyo kills us. He obviously had 2 of the biggest plays of the game. He had the big play, got him down to the 1-yard line at the end. And then Restrepo, we talked about how good he is. You just expected him to play well, but we didn't let him go crazy. 5 for 60. Of course, Virginia Tech receivers Gosnell, Lane, and then the other Gosnell, Benji and Steven play great. And I've learned to love those guys. I mean, they just played really good football for us this year. Aiden Green catches a touchdown from drones on a crazy scramble drill where he ends up hitting them for a touchdown. And so we're seeing some youth from him, especially contributing. Other than that, not a ton to talk about, but we did get after him, and APR had
You won
another
the ball
sack in
game.
this game.
Y'all won the
But
ball game.
I think so, but it didn't reflect that way, and it's unfortunate. But I mean, we'll see what we can do this week. It's kind of one of those games where you come out this week and you got to play with that anger. Next game here, OSU Kansas State. This was ugly. I mean, Kansas State proved that they have a dominant run game. If you watch this one, they designed plays for Avery Johnson to get him the ball out, like get the ball out of his hands much quicker. He has struggled in this whole season just running the ball and kind of getting his yards here and there, running the ball, but not doing a whole lot passing. They had plays designed this week with short routes, even dump downs to his halfback, that he could get the ball out super quick. So he didn't have to make a lot of decisions. As you can see, looking at the stats, this is one of his better passing games. He goes for 259, 3 touchdowns. He does throw the 1 pick, but he played much, much better as a passer. And they're going to be successful if you can get that kind of passing out of Avery Johnson.
And running too. Like look at DJ Giddens, 187 yards.
Yeah.
That's a crazy game right there because you have a quarterback that can run the ball as well.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, look at the stats. This is 34 carries for 300 yards as a team, 8.8 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Yeah, they are amazing at what they do when it comes to their play call and run the ball. I mean, Giddens goes off. That is 15 for 187, 12 and a half yards per carry. Johnson does his job on the ground. And even Dylan Edwards, who, he's their backup. He's a fast speed back compared to Giddens being their power back. I'd like to see him even get worked into it more, maybe on some short routes and stuff, which they started to do that a little bit more to help out Johnson. I mean, Alan Bowman struggles again. This is rough. 2 picks. Now, he did throw the ball a ton of yards, but the completion percentage is down, and the 2 picks is rough. I mean, you just can't turn the ball over against Kansas State, who can control the game. Again, like you said, looking at the running game, Gordon does have a better game here than he's had, and in that game, watching it, Gordon was trying to make plays. It almost looked like he's tired of being in this slump. He was running guys over, and even though he's only getting 4 or 5 yards on those big plays, he was at least making the plays. I'd like to just see him get him the ball more. Maybe not even in the running game, but maybe throw him some screens or some checkdowns and just let that guy go because he's just too good to be held down like he has been this year. We've talked about a lot of these receiving guys for Kansas State. Jace Brown plays well, 4 for 78. You kind of learn to expect he's going to be their stud each week. Looking at the other side, Oklahoma State, De'Zhaun Stribling, I've talked about him many a times. The dude's phenomenal. I mean, get him the ball, 7 for 157 and a touchdown. That's a phenomenal game, great game from him. Presley plays well. And even Shetron, who only goes 3 for 42, we've talked about him in the past.
Yep.
He has an all right game. Oklahoma State doesn't get after him, man. That's
all.
no sacks, only 2 TFLs. And now you can see the same thing replicated on the other side from Kansas State, who, isn't a super top-tier defense. But Oklahoma State, it's different. When you've only got 2 TFLs against a team that ran the ball 30 times,
That's bad.
You just got to get in the backfield every once in a while. Blow a play up. You push them behind the line of scrimmage because if Kansas State plays ahead of the sticks, they're impossible to beat. Dude, they run the ball so well.
They run the ball so well, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's a good game for Kansas State, and they definitely bounced back here. And they do look like a pretty good football team in this game. Next game here. This was a big talking point. People wanted to say, Indiana's first real opponent. They've played 4 games and they've played nobody. So what will they do against a team that is in the Big Ten and it's a team that it matters? You got to win this game in your conference if you want to have any chance in the conference, especially with the teams that are in there this year. And they do. They handle business. They play well. 42 points. They've scored well all year. Their offense has been pretty high-powered. And looking at the stats, actually, you look at Billy Edwards Jr., he plays great. 26 for 41, 289, 3 touchdowns. That's a really good game. No picks. The running game also is pretty doggone good. Roman Hemby goes 10 for 117 and a touchdown. That's a great game from him. And they lose by 14. So you can just kind of tell what Indiana can do to you, even with the 2 picks from Rourke. He goes 359, 3 touchdowns. And their running game is great. I mean, Tyson Lawton, we talked about him last week. Justice Ellison, talked about him as well. They both run the ball well in this game. Both have touchdowns on the ground. So that's big. I mean, Indiana can do a lot. Their offense is very dynamic. That's obviously important in college football these days to have a dynamic offense. Looking at Maryland, there's probably the key to them not winning that game. Ty Felton doesn't go off. They've needed Ty Felton every week to be the team they've been. We talked about it. He's been over 150 yards in 3 other 4 games coming into this one, and he goes 5 for 38. They held him down, and that shows Indiana can do a good job at containing the other team's best player. Of course, looking at the other side, Indiana lead receiver Elijah Surratt. Again, we talked about him following Kirk Snetti here. He plays awesome. 7 for 128 and a touchdown. And, that's the guy. I mean, they've got him the ball, and Curtis Short needs to just keep doing it. Keep getting this guy the ball, keep running the ball well. And heck, maybe they come into that Michigan game 9-0, baby. And maybe their
And
Indiana football's back.
maybe they're in the playoffs. You
They're
never
back.
know. If you beat Michigan, I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
yeah, you're in the playoffs. That's 100%.
Indiana defense. Look at this, man. 5 sacks, 8 TFLs. They're getting to the quarterback. That's also important.
That's why you win ball games.
Yeah, you got to have a defense that can compete, and that's huge, man. Other than that, I mean, Indiana looks to be rolling, and again, they have a very winnable schedule up until that Michigan game, and if they get into that point being 9-0, they're going to be ranked. That's going to be a big matchup, and I mean that's a chance to shock the world. If Indiana goes 11-1 this year with their only loss being Ohio State, I
It
mean, come
might
on,
be.
nobody expected
What
it.
if they beat Ohio State? I mean,
Well, that would
that's
maybe
crazy.
push
I
it a
mean,
little bit.
but
Maybe push it a little bit, but
that's pushing a little bit. But
I like Indiana, man. They're good, and I'm glad
that's
that
old school. But
yeah,
let them play some football.
let them be some football guys. Next game here. I mean, this was a good game. You see it. I mean, 31-24. Notre Dame has bounced back after looking rough in that game that they lost, and then Louisville, of course, suffers their first loss here. But it's not a horrible loss traveling to Notre Dame. That's not an easy place to play, and still both teams look good. Looking at the stats, I mean, as you can see, Shao played awesome. 264, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. You like to not have the pick, of course, but I mean, that's a good game. They run the ball pretty well, 13 for 72 from their lead back, but we've talked about how they kind of spread the ball around a little bit in the backfield. Looking at Notre Dame, Riley Leonard, he only goes 163 for 2 touchdowns, but he was very efficient, 17 for 23.
And he can rush the ball pretty good.
We've talked about that. Jeremiah Love actually doesn't have an insane game, and they beat a ranked football team without Jeremiah Love going off. You finally see a little bit of production out of the receiving room. Jaden Greathouse goes 4 for 61 and a touchdown. That's big. You need at least a little bit of contribution from these guys. And Jeremiah Love catches 5 passes out of the backfield, so that's also important. We talked about Ja'Cory Brooks. He's a superstar at Louisville. He does play like a superstar again, 5 for 71 and 2 touchdowns. But Notre Dame was just a little bit overwhelming, and their talent is there. They have a great offensive line. They have a good defense like they normally do. And it was just a little bit too much for Louisville. But if Louisville doesn't start out so bad with that first quarter, maybe they hang around in there and win it. But, I mean, Notre Dame gets it done. Next game here, of course, this was a great one. Texas A&M barely hangs on to beat Arkansas. And, of course, this was, like we talked about, very important for A&M. It's the last Southwest Classic. It's in the state of Texas, so it was more important to them to get that win. And it's a big rivalry. Not playing there again is surprising, especially with the kind of brand of football they put on the field. Looking at the stats, Taylor Green goes 23 for 41. I mean, that's a lot less efficient than he has been in the past. I mean, you'd obviously like to see a higher completion percentage, but he does go 279 in touchdown. He does throw the pick. On the other side, Texas A&M, Marcel Reed took over for Wegman. He goes 11 for 22, 163, 2 touchdowns, and Marcel Reed looks like the guy that will keep them going this year. Definitely a better option than Wegman. The running game.
Arkansas didn't get it going, which is surprising to me because I thought they had the best rushing attack in the SEC. Obviously, I don't know because a bunch of Vols are pretty dang good at running the ball, but they just didn't get it going in this game, and Texas A&M did. That's why they won the ball game, in my opinion. Le'Veon Moss running for 117 yards. That's a game changer right there, especially not being able to run the ball on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about coming into it. Quentin Jackson was the leading rusher in the SEC, and they need to get him going. It's a large part of their offense. They like to run Green, they like to run Jackson, and they like to run sets with both of them going. And watching this one, A&M was doing a great job at getting after Green, and he was just off balance the whole game. When he would make a decision to run, it was a bad decision because somebody would be open. But then he'd try to make the decision to throw the ball, and he almost got picked off more than the one time he did. And it was just because he was just not making good decisions. He made poor decisions in this game, and ended up losing them for him. I mean, in a 4-point game, the poor decisions will cost you. Looking at the receiving, Isaac Tesla, I mean, the dude's a stud, 5 for 120 and a touchdown. But they didn't get Centennia going, and they didn't have Luke Haas going at all, and that's one of the best tight ends in the country. On the other side for A&M, Noah Thomas plays phenomenal. Marcel Reed has found a guy he likes to throw to, and that's obviously important for a new quarterback to find his big target. But yeah, A&M wins it 21-17, and we'll see what A&M can continue doing this year as they're a ranked football team. So, I mean, they have chances to go into places and upset people, and maybe that jumps them up in the rankings. Next game here. This one, obviously, Ohio State. We talked about it. We said we had to talk about them. It was their first game, their first real challenge, quote unquote. It wasn't a real challenge. They beat the daylights out of Michigan State, 38-7. I mean, it got ugly. Will Howard He goes 21 for 31, 244, 2 touchdowns and a pick. And then, of course, Devin Brown has the touchdown. Now, if you watch the touchdown that Devin Brown threw, it was unbelievable because Jeremiah Smith just made a ridiculous play, one-handed catch for a touchdown. Um, on the other side, Aiden Childs, we talked about how he turns the ball over. He does it again with a pick. He goes 13 for 19, 167 and a touchdown. I mean, the running game, obviously, Ohio State's going to be great at running the ball. They have two of the best backs in the country, and they do run the ball well. 7 for 69 from TreVeyon Henderson, and then Quinshon Judkins goes 11 for 54. I mean, they just controlled this game. It looked really, truly easy for them. They look like a far better team than Michigan State. And then we go down to the receivers. I mean, Ohio State, we're talking about one of the best receiving rooms in the country. They
I
have,
think they have the best receiving room in the country.
yes, I would
They
agree.
are insanely talented.
Yes, I would agree with you. I think they have a guy in Emeka Egbuka who's a first round pick. They have Jemiah Smith, who, I mean, this dude is clearly easily looks like a first round pick in the future.
Yep.
And then they have other guys on this team that are really solid. I mean, Brandon Ennis even, and he only had one catch for 14 yards. They just have so many options, man. It's going to be a nightmare for these other top teams playing them because who are you facing in the country that has this many elite athletes? Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. Then the list just keeps going. The talent is unbelievable on the Ohio State team. On the other side, looking at Michigan State, they do get the ball out a little bit to Glover and Marsh, but again, nowhere near enough to beat this Ohio State team. They're really, really good. All right, to finish this sucker out, I'll be by myself. Dalton's having some technical difficulties. Unfortunately, we were kind of affected by that the hurricane, and he's had a lot of issues at home with power and whatnot, and internet's going in and out. So we lost him here, but I'll finish it off for us. Not too many games left on the slate here. Next one is obviously huge. Penn State playing Illinois. Penn State got the home game. I mean, this is big for them. They had to get a win in the conference. And Illinois on the other side, of course, they were hoping to continue the hot play that they've had. And I don't think they played a bad football game, but they just didn't have enough offensive production to beat Penn State. Looking at the stats, as you can see, Luke Altmaier, he played all right. 16 for 25, 185, a touchdown and a pick. I mean, if we had the same Altmaier that we had a couple weeks ago, just very consistent, doesn't turn the ball over, maybe they could have had this game in their hands, but it was super close anyways. Looking at the other side, passing wise, Drew Aller goes 15 for 21 with 135. And like I said, the offense is not ultra productive. They don't have too much in the passing game, especially, but I mean, look at the running game. Penn State runs the ball really well. Katron Allen runs the ball 18 for 102 and a touchdown. And Nick Singleton, we've talked about him. He's a superstar, 16 for 94 and a touchdown. That's obviously what won this game. I mean, the two backs, they have great games, and it was obviously necessary because, again, they didn't pass the ball super well. Looking at Illinois, Fegan got going a little bit, 13 for 64, but they didn't have the rest of their rushing attack at all. I mean, McCray goes for negative yards, and then Altmaier was getting hit in the backfield a ton. I mean, negative 28 yards on the day. That's a lot of sacks. Looking at the receiving game, I mean, Pat Bryant, he's their superstar, Illinois, and he only goes 2 for 33. You kind of need more out of him. Zachary Franklin plays well, however, with 4 for 49. But again, they just needed Pat Bryant in this game to have any chance. Looking at Penn State, we talked about Tyler Warren last week. He's kind of the check down for Aller to get the ball out, and they ended up getting it done. I mean, it was just enough for Penn State, and of course, their defense is the story. I mean, 7 sacks. I mean, they were all over Altmaier all game. I mean, he had no time to make plays. Also, 13 TFLs. That's just a ridiculous game. Penn State's defense gets it done for them, but they will need offensive production to beat top teams in the Big Ten. Next game here, I mean, Washington State travels to Boise State. This was a big one. We talked about it coming up to it. Both teams have to play well in this game. I mean, Boise to continue their winning streak that they're on after the Oregon game. And on the same side with Washington State, we talked about how they have to win out probably. I mean, it's all about being ranked. They don't have a conference championship game, so the odds of them making the playoffs are super, super slim. Boise plays well. Maddox Madsen goes 12 for 21, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. He just has to do his job. I mean, look at Ashton Jeanty, 26, 259, 4 touchdowns. He is the best running back in the country. The dude is unbelievable. In my opinion, I know it's a quarterback award now, sadly, but the Heisman, in my opinion, should either go to him or Hunter. But Jeanty is my favorite. I love seeing a running back dominate like he did, and that's just a phenomenal football game. Multiple big-time carries where he breaks through and runs for big-time gains, 40, 50 yards down the field. And Jeanty's he's just him, man. He's the best in the country at doing what he does. On the other side, Washington State quarterback John Mateer, he plays well, 327, 2 touchdowns and a pick. They just didn't get their run game going like they usually have going. Wayshawn Parker goes 11 for 35, and Mateer, I mean, 20 for 28. He had no run game at all. And then Boise was in his face a lot, and Boise just runs away with it. They controlled the game in the second half, especially because of Genty and his running game and just being able to run out the clock. Looking at the defense for Boise, 8 sacks, 11 TFLs. I mean, they're all over Mateer in this game, and that's the difference in the game. They just didn't have time, man. Didn't have time to make plays, and Boise just dominates this one. To me, Boise looks like the clear, outside the power conference. I think they're the team. They're the one that's going to make the playoffs, in my opinion, so far. And they could have slip ups here and there. And if something were to happen to Genty, then maybe they're not. But that to me is the team. Boise looks great. Next game here, this was a big one. Arizona goes in and beats Utah, and honestly, Utah's offense just non-existent. They're not good enough to win without Cam Rising. They have to have Cam Rising if they want to win anything this year. And he's just not healthy, man. He just doesn't stay on the field. Isaac Wilson goes 20 for 40. I mean, that's not a good completion percentage. 280, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. He struggled with that all year. I think this is his 7th pick on the year now, and that's too much. You can't have 7 interceptions, and especially the competition they're playing against. Utah does run the ball well. Michael Bernard goes 16 for 91, and we talked about how, he has to play well for them to win this game. He has to run the ball well, and he doesn't do bad, but the 2 picks throws it away for him. On the other side, Arizona, passing game was not, unbelievable in this game, but, 19 for 31, 197, 2 touchdowns is not an awful game. You don't like to see the pick, but he doesn't throw as many as Wilson does on the other side, and then running the ball. I mean, Arizona's run game was awesome in this game. We talked about Quali Conley and how he had to play well, and truthfully, they got better carries from their other back. And you see 7 for 73, that's a great game. 14 for 72, also a good game. And the ball was just flowing on the ground. Looking at the receiving, Tetero McMillan, 6 for 50. Kean Burnett, he goes 5 for 76 and a touchdown. They got protection from somebody other than Teteroa, and that's huge because Teteroa is one of the best receivers in the country. And when he isn't your lead receiver and you still score 23 points, that's nice. They don't have to lean on him as much. On the other side, Utah receiver Dorian Singer has a phenomenal game, 9 for 155. And Brant Keithy, which we talked about last week, needing to be kind of a piece for them to win this game. He plays well. It's just Wilson's turnovers are just too much, man. No sacks from Utah either. They're not getting after Fafita, and that's the big difference. I mean, they got after Wilson and forced him to make mistakes and even had the 3 sacks. And Arizona, I mean, they bounced back and they look pretty good in this game. And we'll see, man. This conference can play out in a lot of ways, but Arizona starts out 1-0 in the conference. Next game here, I mean, look at this one. 41-34, but if you were watching it, that does not tell the story of this game. Georgia is down 28-0. Everybody thought Alabama was just going to run away with it. I mean, they come out playing unbelievable football. It was easy. I mean, offense was easy. Defense was easy. Georgia looked rushed. They had no run game in the first half. Beck was playing awful. Georgia, they looked like they didn't look like a ranked football team in the first half. But goodness, did they come out with second half adjustments. I mean, look at this game. Beck, 439, 3 touchdowns. He does throw the 3 picks. However, to clarify on the 3 picks, one of them was awful. He throws over the middle to a linebacker, and that was in the first half. And that mistake you just couldn't have at that point in the game, especially when they were already getting blown out. Now, the other 2 picks, one was a kind of a misread by him to not pay attention to the screen, but it was also just a big mistake by his receiver. His receiver runs up and cuts across the field, runs a slant route on what was supposed to be a screen to that receiver, and you could tell that was what the play was because Kirby grabbed the receiver afterwards and just he just said, "Calm down, man. You gotta make that play. You gotta come back." It's unfortunate because that pick obviously resulted in a Bama score, and they just couldn't have it at that point. They were already down. And then, of course, the last pick he throws was in the end of the game on the throw up to the end, back into the end zone, and Bama's corner makes a nice play on the ball and picks it off. But again, I don't blame that one on him too much. He's throwing a jump ball to try to win the game. On the other side, Milroe plays his best game of the year by far. It's not even debatable. He goes 27 for 33, which is awesome completion percentage, 374 yards, 2 touchdowns. Does throw the 1 pick, but that really wasn't on him. His tight end kind of bobbled the ball and it got picked off. And then, of course, Milroe's run game, we've talked about how dynamic that is. 16 for 117 and 2 touchdowns. Now, I will say, Georgia contained him way better in the second half. Now, all those stats didn't come in the first half, but a lot of them did. Georgia's defense just decided to wake up and finally adjust and make a difference and not allow Milroe to roll out and make a ton of plays like he was in the first half. Now, we've talked about it before. Kirby, coming into this game, he's the best coach in the country, in my opinion, and he definitely made second half adjustments that got him back in this football game. and they were able to contain Milroe. He didn't run much, and the run game in general for Alabama wasn't insane in this football game. On the other side, Georgia, I would have liked to have seen them run the ball more with ETN, but it's just so hard to do that when you're down 28-0. They didn't get the run game going until the second half, and when it was going, it was good, but they had to score so fast because they had to catch up. Looking at receiving, multiple guys play well. I mean, Arian Smith goes 6 for 132. Dylan Bell plays well, 5 for 100. And Dominic Lovett goes 6 for 59 yards. It's all great games from those guys. On the other side, Bama, I mean, Ryan Williams has stepped up and been unbelievable for them. The production from everyone else in the passing game is not that great. We don't really see a second receiver for Bama right now that's stepped up and been amazing, but Ryan Williams is definitely their lead guy. He is a superstar. 6 for 177 and a touchdown, and 2 of those plays were just unbelievable. He made the one catch that put him back ahead after Georgia had just scored, and he did everything on that play. He comes back to a not so great ball by Milroe, and he makes a play. He jukes out 2 guys and goes 75 yards for a touchdown. Unbelievable play. And then the other one was a little bit of an overthrow, and Williams gets his hand on the ball, tips it around, catches it inside the 10, and just another huge play in the second half. A lot of what they did in the second half was just Ryan Williams, and it was enough to win. Looking at the defenses, of course, we talked about how Georgia just didn't do anything to Milroe. They didn't affect him that much at all in the first half. I mean, it was 0 effect in the first half, but in the second half, they did get after him a little bit. He was forcing passes, getting the ball out quicker, and that was huge for Georgia because if it wasn't for that, Bama would have ran away with this game. On the other side, for Bama, they do have 3 sacks. They do get to Beck. They do make him make mistakes, and that was obviously the story of this game is if Georgia hadn't dug such a big hole, maybe they could have won it, but Bama did enough, and they looked phenomenal in this game. Their offense is just super high-powered, and we'll see how the rest of the season plays out for them. Thank you guys so much for joining this week. I appreciate everybody watching the recaps and taking in some awesome college football action in general. Hopefully we'll have Dalton back on Thursday. He was here for a lot of the video, but just missed this back half. Internet issues and stuff hopefully can be worked out, and we'll have him back. If you enjoy the videos, please like and subscribe. It helps to grow the channel, and hopefully we can just keep getting this content out for people to enjoy. And again, thank you guys. Peace.